Hello everyone, Father John from St Ignatius Parish in St Heliers, Auckland, inviting you to join with me in a reflection on the readings of the 21st Sunday of the year. Let me begin by saying that some time ago I was speaking with a woman who had left the church. She gave me all sorts of reasons for her leaving, and when she'd finished I replied to her, if I believed in a church like that, I'd leave it too. We'll come back to her. I think these readings today invite us to go deeper and also to come to a more contemporary understanding of what these readings have to say to us today. Let's begin with the Romans reading. Here we find Paul talking about the wonder of God. Who can ever counsel God? God's ways are beyond us, but at the same time, this same God is revealed in Jesus Christ. If we come to the Gospel and we find there Jesus asking his disciples, who do people say that he is? All the disciples, not just Peter. Peter speaks up and gives a list of possible candidates. And Jesus then says, who do you, plural, say that I am? Not only Peter, but you and I. Peter replies, you are the Christ. You are the Son of the living God. And Jesus calls him blessed because it is not flesh and blood that has led him to this conclusion, but it is God who has revealed Jesus to him. Where did he get this revelation? It comes through the whole history of his ministry. He leaves his boat and follows this Jesus who somehow has a wonderful attractiveness and who then invites him to join him in every village in Galilee. There, Jesus is the center. He preaches, he heals, he forgives. He brings exorcisms to those who need it. He teaches the people to reach out to those who cannot keep the law and who would thereby have been despised, mainly because of their poverty. And then also to those who are hated, like the tax collector. And at the end of the day, this Jesus causes this village to sit down as a whole, and people with whom they have never ever spoken before, they sit down and enjoy a meal together. There is a vision of who Jesus is, and there is a vision of what the kingdom he preaches is, not just for the little village, but for all. Through this, Peter comes to his affirmation of faith. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let's turn then to Jesus' response. He gives Peter a change of name. You are Petros, or the Greek word for rock. Now, we have understood the rock as a firm point of refuge or response for the church, and in part that is true. But here we need to go deeper in this gospel, because in the Old Testament, God is many times, especially in the Psalms, described as my rock. You are my rock in my hardest times. You are the rock on which my faith stays and in which you hold me. This picture of God as our rock and Jesus as our rock, I, Jesus, will build my church, not you, Peter, gives us a bigger picture of this rock. Peter, we see in Matthew's Gospel, is a very fallible man with whom we can perhaps all identify. He gives Jesus a call. If it's you, tell me to walk on water. Jesus says, fine. And then Peter, beginning to sink, calls out, Lord, save me. And Jesus takes him and says, you of little faith. Just after this, Peter tells Jesus, this must not happen to you. You must not go to Jerusalem and die. We'll hear this next week. And so Peter is saying to Jesus, no, you do what I say, not what you say. And the temptation to reverse what Jesus commands is thereby Peter's. Get behind me, he says. Be my disciple again. Get back to your original experience. At the Garden of Gethsemane, Peter runs away and abandons Jesus in his time of need. At his trial, he denies him 3 times. Is this the rock? Yes, it is. But we need to bring this understanding of Peter, who in church descriptions later on becomes identified with the Bishop of Rome. The woman of whom I spoke had great troubles with the Pope and with the institutional understanding of the church. But in this gospel, we can find something more. What we find is in the Vatican Council, the church describes the Peter as the bishop of a whole group, as the Bishop of Rome and part of a whole fixed group of bishops throughout the world. Think of a circle whereby every bishop is connected with their own people in another circle, and in which thereby the entire church is linked, circle within circle, and connected with the Bishop of Rome in one circle, which is that of the College of Bishops. Now, the temptation is to place Peter, or the Bishop of Rome, at the center, and he is the rock at the center. Wrong. Jesus is the center of the church, and Peter is, like all the rest of us, part of the circle meant to lead the church into full discipleship with Jesus. When we come to our own diocese and bishop, we have another circle in which we are all involved, and the ministry of the bishop is to allow us and encourage us to be open to the Jesus who is our rock and who is the center of our faith and our church, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus says to Peter then, you have an incredible responsibility. You can bind and you can loose. Part of the binding has been understood as setting rules and regulations, which if we break, we're in trouble, and which then or else rules which we can be released from. This is fine, but there is more to that than simply that. If we find in the first reading from which this picture is inspired, we find Shebna, the master of the king's palace, being thrown out and his ministry being given to Hilkiah, I think it is, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah. And there it's called opening and closing. And thereby we have a part of the church which can open pathways to Jesus, and we have a church which can close pathways to Jesus and the gospel. Here we find an understanding of the church in which we are all involved. If we place ourselves at the center, we find Jesus saying, get behind me, become a disciple again. We need to reform our church, but this gospel invites us in the first instance to get in touch with God, our rock, our creator, who is beyond our understanding. We cannot give God advice, but this God is revealed as love, and Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of the living God. As we identify ourselves, we must thereby identify ourselves in relation to this church community, which is being built not by Peter, not by you and me alone, but by Jesus and the Spirit building our church. This contemporary understanding of our church is the challenge whereby the woman with whom I spoke and who finds so much at fault with church can go deeper into her faith with God, and the God is love, into Jesus, who is the leader and the builder of our church, its strongest inspiration and its strongest call to change, and thereby allow it to be a path whereby we can open pathways for all peoples and bring them the light and the joy of the gospel.